Of you that are just tuning in now, welcome to Still Growing in Grace, kind of a weekly program of growing in our knowledge and understanding of God's amazing love. None of us have arrived. That's why it's called Still Growing in Grace. And I've got Brad Jersak here from out west, Western Canada. So I believe you're in Abbotsford, are you?
That's right.
Good. So I met Brad a couple of years ago in a coffee shop in Abbotsford, I think it was, because I was out to meet, what's his name at the monastery?
Archbishop Lazar?
Yes.
Oh, good.
So I had a tour and had the pleasure of meeting him. Wise guy. I really like him. Not a wise guy, but a wise. Oops. So anyway.
He's a sage, that's for sure.
Yes, that's a good way to put it. So this morning, my goal is to have a conversation with Brad, or Brad, I want to have a conversation with you about this ongoing stress of COVID. I don't know about you, but I've been watching the news and I am so frustrated and probably exhausted. Fatigued is a good word from all the negativity coming from politics in both Canada and the United States. That now the masking stuff, everybody's complaining about, hey, you're a masker, well then you're dumb, or you're not a masker, so you're dumb. And then we call ourselves Christians. Like I'm having a really hard time because when people are posting, they don't leave a single iota bit of room for they may be wrong mindset, right? It's absolute. And so I want to kind of talk about how can we get our minds, take every thought captive. And I'd like to have a conversation with you. And then by the end of our conversation, I want to make sure I give you time to talk about this book that's coming out or is out.
Yeah.
Well, give us the title of it now, and then I'll come back to you. You can tell us what it's about later.
It's a novella, which means a short novel by Paul Young, who wrote The Shack, and it's called The Pastor, A Crisis.
Okay.
And it's a work of fiction that does involve composite characters from real life.
So all the characters' names have been changed to protect the true identities.
Well, and by composite, I mean one character may be coming from 6 different people's stories.
Oh, yeah.
But it's rooted enough in reality that the graphic nature of it is actually authentic and gives us a chance for overt healing as well. We'll come back to that, but
yep, good.
Yeah, here we are in 2020. Someone called it, we'll think of this as the pandemic year. Well, hopefully year singular, but
Yeah. Well, one thing that I've heard, and this is a better way to view it, if you want to learn how to think more positive, is to call it the year of the pause.
Yeah.
And I thought that's a really wise way to perceive it, because otherwise you're going to take it from the negative view. And we're already getting that from our media, for those who are on Facebook or social media. I'm getting exhausted by it all, and I want some good news. What about you?
Yeah, I do too. I would say maybe to get to the good news, we would need to do some sorting between the reality of some people's actual circumstances, right? So I would not want to spin the fact that some people have become sick and died or have lost loved ones as a result of COVID. That's real.
Yeah.
Second, some people are enduring actual financial hardship and layoffs from jobs and wondering if they're going to get evicted. That's real.
Yeah.
So on that side, the reality of suffering, how can we come as faith people, as Jesus way people, into that? Because our faith shouldn't just only work during good times. So when we're facing a real sickness, fatality, or bankruptcy, or whatever, is there a word of hope for those people? But then the other side, and I think we need to separate this away, is a lot of us are suffering from our narrative, and we're telling ourselves a story that generates real anxiety, and we're letting others tell a story that feeds that. In fact, we may think we want to be free from this obsessive anxiety, Meanwhile, we're addicted to the information overload on social media and television. And I'm like, well, do you want to be free or not? Because I have some radical ideas about how to deal with that. But one example would be, you know, and this works in terms of my own healing team. When I've been worked through healing, I realized I had too many voices, and I needed to narrow the scope of those voices so that they were all encouraging and all in agreement, but also all honest. And that meant, instead of having a bombardment of voices, I'm like, okay, who are the people I will actually listen to on this? And I can just turn off the rest. In fact, I literally canceled my news cable service. But what I can do is I can follow, I believe Bonnie Henry, that's our the British Columbia head doctor. I believe she's shown neither paranoia nor bravado. She doesn't make me afraid. She gives me clarity. And I'm like, okay, that's a voice I can listen to. And then another voice I can listen to are, what are the actual instructions on stores I go to? And if they say wear a mask, wear your mask. And and if they don't, what does Christ say? Well, you know, love your neighbors as yourself.
Yeah, but they're trying to control you, Brad.
Yeah.
So I figured that word's going to come up, right?
That's a narrative. And I'm like, what is the fruit of listening to that? Well, one fruit is I get afraid, and another fruit is I get defiant. Fear and defiance have nothing to do with being a Christian disciple. So the narrative of control is bearing itself out as false through the bad fruit of either fear or defiance. And I'm watching it. I'm not afraid. But I'm also not defiant. I'm like, is it control if someone asks me to put my seatbelt on? I guess so. You know, I don't need one now, but is it control if your partner asks you to wear a condom? You know, like, come on. So I think you can go deep into paranoia around either the control factor but I just think a lot of that has to do with exalting my rights and my way above basic love of neighbor without fear. So I went to a 12-step meeting last night. We met outdoor in a park. We met face to face, 6 feet apart.
Yep.
And we had an incredible connection time, and we self-regulated. I think that's part of it too, is like, I don't mind self-regulating, but don't tell me what to do. It's like, well, okay, then, don't tell me what to do sounds a lot like Adam and Eve in the garden, you know? So that's one angle. So just to review what I've said so far, it's like I would distinguish between the real hardships people are experiencing and how to face those, and then the kind of narratives that we feed off of that actually exacerbate the anxiety.
Yeah.
And that's a decision, actually. I'm not just undergoing anxiety. I'm not, if you want control, turn off your TV and unplug from social media. That'll give you control. But no, who wants to do that, right? Don't tell me what to do. Okay.
It's funny how the don't tell me what to do is an underlying thought for a lot of stuff going on right now.
Yeah.
You know, and not just in the COVID world. I'm talking in the church world. You know, when you have some folks who have come into a neat revelation of God, and now they polarize their new revelation with what they used to believe. I've done this. That is now wrong, and this is now right. And so we have these two right and wrongs that we declare, and we're so excited about the new right that we just bash the wrong, forget there are people that are still there that see it maybe a little differently. And there's an ungracious approach. And it's the wrong approach, I think, from the wrong tree, the tree of the knowledge of right and wrong, good and evil. I was
thinking the same thing. You're still at the same tree then, right?
Wrong tree, exactly. So I've also heard some conflicting words are that when we there's nothing to do with submission here. When we submit, it's not the right terminology for submitting to the rules, but I think it is. I think when we submit to Christ, we surrender all of our rights. In my mind, I see it as I yield to those in front of me. I just finished reading Love is Patient, Love is Kind at a funeral yesterday and realized agape is other-centered. So if I'm other-centered all the time, then I am reflecting Christ in me. When I am saying, no, I want this, self-seeking, that's no longer agape. It's probably eros or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. So you've used a cluster of really powerful words there. So submission, surrender, and yielding. All of those words describe kenosis, which is other-centered, self-giving love. Kenosis is the very nature of God's love. It's, in other words, Christ emptied himself for the sake of others to demonstrate the Father's love to us. And he shows us what that looks like in the Garden of Gethsemane when he yields to for the sake of others, even when it means facing suffering. And so if Christ had gone into my will be done in the Garden of Gethsemane, we'd all be damned, And so I hear you calling us into very basic Christ-likeness. The transfiguration of empowering grace generates a humble attitude of yielding, and you just can read it in Philippians chapter 2, and it's like if our right theology, our identity in Christ, and all of that generates pride rather than humility, defiance rather than submission, then we're not being empowered by grace. We're being empowered by a modernistic worldview that says your autonomy is the highest moral value. And we call that freedom. That's not freedom. That freedom is a euphemism there for self-will. And self-will is the that's what got us in the predicament in the first place. So willfulness versus willingness. And yeah, so I really resonate with what you're saying.
I've had to bite my tongue at times in grocery stores when people aren't distancing, they aren't following the lines, because give me the rules and it's easy to follow. When there are no rules, everybody has an opinion. So I'm in my region, they've made a rule, you must wear the mask. And so I thought, great, that'll reduce the fighting. Well, it actually raised the anxiety in one sense for those who are not. And so I forgot that I also need to be loving to those who are either unaware, whether intentionally or unintentionally, and not be so quick to snap, hey, you see the line? Hey, it's hard. And because I like everybody doing the same thing, because then there's peace in everybody following the current guidelines for safety, right? But then I just realized,
how do we push back against the accusation that well, that's the law and I don't need, grace puts me beyond the law?
Oh, please. Oh my goodness. Listen, Brad, that drives me nuts. I'm teaching identity in Christ a couple of years ago at my church, and some people walked out and called me legalistic because I talked about laws. But I don't see the law of the life of Christ rules us. There's still the law of the life of Christ. But the law that most people are referring to are the rules you must keep in order to maintain or get rightness with God. That's done. That's old covenant. The new covenant is the law of life, which swallows up the old covenant in its intent, not in its macro rules, but it's now the person. So to say we're above the law, no. We're actually, if you want to read a little further, it says submit then to the governments around you, pay your taxes. Come on, that's a big point, and there's some people who are militant about that.
Well, we're pretty selective too, to be
Of
honest, right?
course.
I'll obey it if it's to my benefit. And
Yes.
maybe that is a way in. I remember hearing someone preaching on the Ten Commandments and how, the Sermon on the Mount, it'll grab a few of those ideas, but he fulfills it in the sense of that, well, how is this about love, right? So
Mm.
I, if you think about yourself as the beneficiary, it's, what did they call that? Enlightened self-interest. But he's like, how would you like to live in a society where no one will ever kill you? No one will
Mm.
ever steal from you. No one will ever cheat on your spouse with your spouse on you. No one would ever lie to you. No one, oh, that'd be nice. It's like, well, I'm just describing the Ten Commandments from the viewpoint of love if I'm the beneficiary. So
Mm.
how would we, how would you like how would you like to live in a society where no one carrying the virus ever comes within 6 feet of you and coughs on you? Would that be okay?
That'd be
Or,
awesome.
you know, but what then when we say, well, if I want that for me, then maybe I could have the love of God in me, for love your neighbor as yourself, have a little empathy here.
Is
But
it
more than
possible?
that, go ahead.
Is it possible people don't love themselves and that's why they can't love others like that? Do you think that might play a role in that?
Maybe. I'm thinking that not loving ourselves can still look very selfish, right? So at the heart of it, maybe we don't, maybe there's a kind of self-loathing. Maybe we can't empathize with others because we don't love ourselves. Um, but that could still look like very selfish behavior, right? So I do I do think it can be more than just like a defensive posture too against COVID. We could say, oh, all right, so now what an incredible opportunity to demonstrate love for others, not only in the sense of don't cough on them and wear your mask, but it's like I am surprised at some of the beautiful ways I'm seeing people help each other,
Mm.
and in fact, new connections being formed. So, for example, on my cul-de-sac, before this crisis, I didn't know everybody's name. On my little cul-de-sac, I've
Mhm.
lived here 15 years, and I couldn't tell you all the children's names. There's only 10 houses or 12 houses. I didn't, and here's the reality, I didn't care about our alienation.
Ouch.
And now I kind of do. And the weirdest thing happened. I ended up starting to learn their names, and then the Lord made an opportunity where my fence was rotting and falling down, and now the neighbor couple next door and I went halves on getting a guy to come in and fix our fence. And it's like, but you're gonna have to move the fence. So now we're working together.
Mhm.
And out of gratitude that he set the whole thing up, my wife's like, well, let's have a social distancing supper together on our deck. And it's like
Wow.
15 years into this, I finally actually, am connecting. So there's a way of turning the disconnect and into a
Mhm.
commitment against alienation. And maybe on a broader scale, even the defiance about social distancing, which we never minded before. Now it's enforced on us. Now maybe
That's
we're being
funny.
energized to connect in healthy ways. It doesn't have to be in toxic ways. It could be healthy
All
ways.
the introverts were saying, "We've been trying this for years. Come on."
Yeah. And so I do think reset. What did you call it? A year of pause. For me, it's been a real reset in terms of what practices have I begun that I'd like to make permanent now,
Hmm.
and also what things did I stop doing that I think I'm gonna stop doing forever. And
Hmm.
that's one way to come at it. And in both of those cases, it feels like new opportunities, new freedom.
Yeah, that's cool. I know in the church world, because I'm a pastor, and we had to shut down our public services, and we're just beginning to plan reopening, sort of, in a safe way. And There are some churches that are being militant about, nope, God's going to protect us. We're going to have our meetings anyway, blah, blah, blah. The state can't tell us what to do. The province can't tell us what to do. And all those non-Christ responses, or I think they're not a reflection of Christ. That's creating anxiety as well. And I think it's also changing the way church functions, or even what is the church anymore, or what it wasn't is now being revealed.
Yeah.
Like,
wow, ouch.
Yeah.
What it wasn't is now being revealed. I just got back. We've been doing Zoom kind of church, which I'm glad that there was upsides. We saw people showing up more regularly than they had when it was in person, right? They thought they were regular attenders once a month, and now they're on every week. So that's pretty cool. But there's something missing when it's not flesh.
Yes.
The word was not made digital. The word was made flesh.
Yep.
So last week I got to the monastery. We had a slightly larger than average attendance, but we met outside, again, social distancing. And here's the thing to warn you about, Mike. We had to work out how are we going to gather in the unity of faith around Jesus Christ before the fearful are unafraid and before the defiant are undefiant. So in other words, we had very scared people who dared to show up. We had very defiant people who strutted their way in, and were like, how can we live together when we haven't yet let go?
Did you talk about that?
Yeah. Well, it was weird. It felt like the leadership led by example. So, and also we had to get in, you had to have your temperature taken. You had to wash your hands. You had to sign your name, your phone number, and get a ticket that would give you a number for the RCMP if they needed it. So there was and I think some people were rolling their eyes, and there were the rules, and it's like you must wear a mask and all of that. Then we got into the outdoor space where the service was, and some people just wouldn't wear their masks, but they were good about keeping their distance. They're like, I have convictions about masks, but I know if you're worried, I'm not going to make you worried about me.
Mm-hmm.
And then I really noticed, even myself, I was watching for examples. Is the priest putting on a mask? When does he put on the mask? When does he take off the mask? We do sing. Oh, singing's scary. How do we sing? So it was weird because
let's hum that third verse one more time.
Okay. Yeah. And so I found for myself, I would make sure that when I was if I could be socially distanced and I wasn't singing, I could pull my mask down at least below my nose.
Mm-hmm.
And then if I went to sing, I would make sure I'm facing in a direction where there's no people, and I'd put my mask on for the singing and stuff like that. Anyway, what was going on there? It's partly I was taking a cue from the priest that I'm not afraid, but I'm going to take care of my brothers and sisters even in their fear, but I'm not going to belittle those who aren't wearing a mask. But I will make boundaries if I need to. And I have enough authority there that I could do that. And if I saw someone being unsafe, I would say, let's love our brothers. I know you don't want to wear a mask, but I didn't have to do that. So why did it work? Well, I think it was because it was a family, but I could feel it. You had the full polarization within the people.
Okay.
And it's like, can love transcend the polarization? And it did for us, but I think you'd have to manage it.
Yeah, leadership matters. Everywhere where I see it not being safe, it's all about the leadership every single time. I'm trying to do every due diligence, make sure we have disinfecting stuff done. I bought a special fogging machine, a misting machine to disinfect on contact, which will reduce all the labor of wiping down. It's a smart way to go.
Yeah.
But that's one category.
Mississauga, the Greek Orthodox Church there, I saw photos of that too. Yeah, the spraying. It's like,
Yep.
okay.
Absolutely. There's a way to do it and give security and sense of peace to your congregants to know, hey, they're doing a good job. They're doing due diligence. So that's good. Like we're learning.
What do you have some thoughts on the ways we can work with those who really are having hardship? So a lot of what we've talked about is mindsets of fear or defiance.
Yep.
That you confront by a new narrative, that we're not afraid, but love guides us, or something like that. But for those who really are, and it's not just getting COVID as an illness problem. I have a friend who's waiting for heart surgery, but because of the COVID crisis, the wait keeps
Extra long.
being extended. So here's a guy who doesn't have coronavirus, but he kind of does in that sense, right? And also those who have been laid off and now perhaps may even be evicted. Do we have a word of hope for them?
When you figure that out, let me know. That's a hard one, because it might require us to peel back yet another layer of selfishness. As long as my family is secure and I've got my income, bank account's fine, I'm secure for the next 6 months. Okay, good. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear about your problem. Oh my goodness. And do nothing about it.
Right.
That's, again, that's a really important category. And this goes with the depth of knowing we're beloved.
Right.
Because if you don't think you're loved, then you're still trying to get, right? Still trying to protect, self-protect. But when we know we are fully loved, accepted, and liked by God, then we start to see others centered. Then agape starts to have its fruit coming out, and God will put people in your mind. Say, hey, please send them $500, send them 100, drop off groceries, mow their lawn for them, whatever.
We have one couple who runs an Airbnb, and they've put that on suspension so that they can have they've invited a family into their Airbnb now
to live.
Yeah. It pushes back against our culture, but in the end of Acts 2 and up to chapter 4, you're finding out there were no poor among them because they were sharing everything they had. Well, when we've read that up till this year, that seemed quite voluntary, but what was going on, and this happened during the 16th century for sure too, is that Christ prophesied that during times of persecution, your homes would be confiscated. Now, in that case, it was by, let's say, governing authorities. But what if your home is confiscated by coronavirus through an eviction? And what they discovered was that they had everything in common when people started living together. And what they noticed in the Anabaptist movement in the early 1500s is when actually Catholic or Reformed authorities confiscated their homes. What did they do? It's like, well, come live with us. There's absolutely no eviction should not be a problem in a church community. Now, if you're like post-church, you may be screwed. But if you're still in a faith family, I just don't see how anybody in a faith family could lose their home and have nowhere to sleep that night. Because
even deconstructionists have moved to a group fellowship instead of a church building, right? So they're still fellowshipping.
I hope so. Yeah.
It's not about the institution at all. Right. Keith Giles, I think, does a really good job of that. He's got a house church that he connects with. In fact, you and him talked about, I think it was Sermon on the Mount. Was that you and him?
Yep.
Yeah, that was really good. But there's a sense of community that's required. And unfortunately, when you said you're screwed, I think there's a lot of believers who have made zero effort in connecting with others, even in a church. They're more about, hey, why are my needs not being met? But they're not putting effort into relationships. Suddenly, when push comes to shove, a crisis comes, death comes, then why isn't the church loving me? There's still about take, and they're not giving mutually, freely into relationship time, which is where the seeds of connections are, and communication, by the way.
Yeah.
Can't
Well,
read their minds.
I sure hope I'm not tested on it, because I don't know. I
But you're making efforts in relationships. Now it's in your cul-de-sac. That's
Yeah.
a new church. But the idea of we're not alone, but we're actually one with each other, including people who don't believe what we believe, we're still one with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. If you see the separation, then of course you don't care about helping.
Right. Wow. The delusion of separation again.
Absolutely. Gee,
And the
who's
torment.
taught on that before?
Yeah. And the abs and then the a- and then how that creates a reality of alienation. When you
Yeah.
believe the delusion of separation, you begin to live out the alienation. And that's why I think this could be a great moment for for people like us, where we're like, I didn't care enough about the alienation before, and now I'm starting to care about it. And okay, what decisions will I make about that?
That's true. I'm going to go back up to, I'm starting to take a look at some of the notes here. We're getting some comments online. Catherine Toon calls it the year of upgrades. So this is a year of upgrading. And I like how you talked about think through some of the patterns or behaviors that I've stopped doing, and that's it. I'm not bringing them back in. Or here's the new habits. This requires introspection, does it not? Does it?
Or at least, or even better, contemplation, right? So the upgrade, the spiritual upgrade that nobody is prevented from having, even if you get sick, even if you get laid off, not only will you have an opportunity to upgrade into a contemplative way of thinking about the world, of prayer, of your spirituality, not only an opportunity, but it's like virtually a requirement, and it's wonderful. Where I want to say prayer, but it's bigger than that.
Mm-hmm.
Contemplative life living means being like you said, there's an introspection involved there, but it's also a way of seeing the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what would it look like for our prayer lives and our broader lives to be more contemplative? To me, that's a big topic, but that's a serious upgrade.
Yeah, and a required one, but nobody wants to slow down enough to even consider it.
Yeah. And so for some, now they have to.
Yes. Well, you're right. This is forcing a change that everybody thinks is all evil. Something's happening. Well, wait a minute. It can look like that, but what will the fruit of all this be? What are we going to learn? Families are spending time together. Some couples that were going to be breaking up are no longer breaking up, although other couples are now breaking up. Like there's a vicious cycle of this. I want to read one quick quote that Keith Giles wrote. He said, "Your rights are where love goes to die." Paul Young wrote that. And by the way, Paul Young, last Thursday in this Still Growing Grace episode, shared with us that 6 of his family members have COVID, and 3 of them are really sick. So there's somebody we know with loved ones facing this. So
yeah, in our case, my wife's mother passed away indirectly through COVID, in that she had advanced dementia. When COVID hit, it shut down the place where she was living, and her husband could no longer see her every day.
Wow.
Well, he couldn't see her at all, and she's cut off and confused, and she just shut down and died within 2 weeks. Yep. Then we couldn't have a funeral.
Yep.
We tried to do a little social distancing graveside, but the grief in my father-in-law when we couldn't even hug him, mm-hmm. You're like, oh my goodness. And we're like, but we want to hug him. It's important. But like, wait a minute, are we willing to lose him? If one of us is carrying. And so, yeah, so it really hit us. But
so how would you address the question, how do we guard our thoughts during this time? We never got to the deconstruction stress yet. I don't know if we'll have time, but we'll see. But to guard our thoughts in this, how would you speak or share with somebody that's really anxious? I don't know what to do. I'm really worn out now. I just want to shut off everything. What would you?
I'm a big 12-step fan. So step 3 is my solution. to this, and step 3 is how I have to live daily, and step 3 is what I had to work on with a sponsor on this last Sunday morning because I was freaking out about my son's move. Step 3 is my gospel invitation. Here it is. We made a decision and I used to hate that. It's like evangelicals always talk about making a decision, but now I'm seeing I have been making decisions that lead to debilitating anxiety.
Wow.
There was a Y in the road at some point where I could take the path into the life and light and love of God, or I could head down towards this gorilla of debilitating anxiety. At that Y, I did make a decision. What did that look like? So step 3 says, we made a decision to surrender. So there's kenosis, there's the Garden of Gethsemane. We made a decision to surrender to what? Surrender what? Our will. So there's the self-will problem, and our lives. So my actual life, we made a decision to surrender our will and lives over to the care, not the control, care of this loving God. And so what that meant for me practically is, and this has to be a daily process. It has to be every time I'm confronted with fear or the threat of control or whatever. It's like I surrender my will and my life. I surrender my finances to the care of God. I surrendered my family. I surrender my sons, my granddaughter, to the care of a God who I know loves me and who is in fact good. And here's a strange thing. The way that 12-steppers think about this is, my job is not to change the world around me. You can't. That's control. My job is to clean my own house, my heart. And the way I do that is through surrender. But here's the wonderful, ironic thing. It's a little bit like that, Eckhart Tolle's law of attraction, except his is so depersonalized that, but this is maybe it's even a counterfeit. I don't know. But here it is for us. That when I surrender my life and my will over to the care of this loving God without trying to manipulate my circumstances, the world actually responds. Like, well, first of all, God responds, but also people respond differently to me when they meet a yielding, surrendered, loving person who has faith that God is good and loves me. They actually, that does attract a different circumstance. I'll give you one really a happy praise item about this. My circumstances, I still have big glitches. So I have this wonderful coffee cup, which I'm so careful to have a lid on, and I keep it a foot away. It socially distances from my laptop. But it fell over a little while ago, and when it fell over, like, it shot coffee out of the little hole into the corner of my keyboard and ruined my laptop. And like, to find a reconditioned one of the same model that's 5 years old was going to be $1,000. That I'm like, oh, but I have to surrender my life and my will and my circumstances to God. It's like, you know what, you get to take care of me. I guess I'm going to invoice God and let him work it out. I did find a laptop for $1,000. The day I found it and ordered it, I got an unexpected check for the same amount from a charity who usually is asking me for money out of the blue. And they're like, yeah, we just thought what you're doing is important. They didn't know my laptop was wrecked. The check arrived the same day. Another friend called me. I thought about this friend. I thought, he came to mind with gratitude. I thought I should reach out to him and just say, you came to mind with gratitude. I didn't reach out. The next day, we haven't talked in years. The next day he contacted me and he said, I said, that's weird. I just thought of you. He said, well, I thought of you every day this week. And I thought I better call and ask if you have any needs I could help with. I'm like, actually, God's been covering my needs, but I do have this project, this novel, and we got to pay the printing fee. And I probably need $15,000 that, I don't know, maybe I'll go take a loan or mortgage my house. And he goes, well, what if I give you an interest-free loan payable only if you get the money back from the book? I'm like,
Wow.
what?
Twist my arm.
Yeah. So people ask me, like, how does that happen to you? Well, it doesn't happen to me all the time. Sometimes I have to bite the bullet and I tighten my belt. But what I do know is this: when I surrender my life and will to the care of a loving God who I know has my back,
Yep.
This world somehow, because love permeates every atom of the universe, responds with the love of God. All creation groans and waits for us to participate. So it's not the thing of all things work together for good, as in everything will work out in the end. That's not what it means. All
Correct.
things are working together.
Mm.
You're working with your brothers and sisters in Christ, and with your neighbor, and with the animals in your neighborhood, and with every atom in the universe that emanates the love of God. All that begins to work together for the good of your city and your culture.
So
well, that's amazing. How do you tap into it? Through surrender, through yielding.
Right, because you're saying that, but I know for certain somebody's going to immediately think, I want your fruit.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay, you can have it.
I want your fruit
every day.
Well, that's what it's the overrunning the base of the, okay, what do I need to do? But they're always thinking, to get that, I want that. They're overthinking a conditional surrender.
Right. It's getting then, right?
Yes.
Getting, another word for getting, it's the spirit of grasping. So Adam and Eve were already like God.
Yeah.
Right? They were made in the image of God. The serpent comes along and says, if you would just grasp at that tree, then you could be like God. Mm-hmm. So now they're grasping to get what they already are. Philippians 2, though he was equal with God, he did not consider as equality a thing to be grasped, but instead letting go, yielding, surrendering, humbling himself. And so, yeah, you're exactly right. It's tricky because if it's about getting, so in both of the cases I just gave, not only did I not grasp at it, it didn't even come to my mind that these kind people would reach out to me as I surrendered my financial needs to the care of a loving God. And sometimes the best thing for me is going without, and God knows that too.
Mm-hmm. This year will be 30 years. I'll be married this October 12th. And Lori and I have great 2020 hindsight. And we have seen God take care of stuff. And people ask how. Well, I can't give them the menu or the to-do list, because I know for me, this is about surrender. There were times where I did the tithing mindset. There were times I did the surrender. But the point was, we did trust God. We yielded our trust to him. Yeah. Even when it looked scary. In fact, I remember there were times I was horrifically afraid. In fact, we had just moved to Waterloo from Fort Erie, and I was fearful. Like in the middle of the night, in fact, I did the Pentecostal thing. I went through my house and prayed all the demons out of every room and corner. I did, because I had to hit that step just in case, because I felt the pressure coming in. I couldn't sleep that night. Lori knew I was getting anxious, and she said, is this grace stuff you're teaching true or not? Because you're sure not showing it.
Like, wives, eh?
Oh, please. Did you have your devotions today? Yeah, anyway.
Or worse, like, how much should we give this person?
Oh. But she was right.
Yeah.
And I had to do my huff and puff, but then realized completely within seconds, yeah, I need to surrender this and trust God on this too. I am trying to fantasy think in the future too much. I'm future tripping when there's no room for that, because God's not there. I think Paul talked about that last week, Paul Young. The future tripping, you go and fantasize of an outcome that God's not there in that, because that isn't real.
Yeah.
And so right here, right now, right in front of us,
Yeah.
Well, that I thought that was pretty powerful last week.
Yeah, I would want people to know that this is really true of both you and I, that we're going on about surrender, not because that's our temperament, but because it's a required repentance in our lives, because we freak out.
Yeah.
And like I said, just on Sunday morning, I needed an hour to 90 minutes just on letting go of one thing, and I could not do it on my own. I needed a friend to come help me. And so it's like why I'm nonviolent, not because I'm nonviolent, but because I am violent. And it's a call of repentance. Follow the way of Jesus, or you will do stupid things, right? Well, yeah. In the case of, meanwhile, yeah, God's really we married up, didn't we? So
I married up. I know that.
yeah, my wife's brilliant this way, and she's like, so are you going to let this go? And what decision are you making that's causing you to suffer so much? Why you're suffering, and I don't, how do I help you?
Yeah.
And have you handed this over to God yet? It's like, shut up. No, I wouldn't say that to her. I'd be scared. No.
I know that in this COVID time, it has caused my wife and I to have more and deeper conversations. I've had more revealed about myself and how I have functioned over the 30 years. She probably doesn't understand. I haven't talked to her about all this, but I know for me, I can see where I have tried to control circumstances, and she just gives stuff up, no problem. She's just so free. Good grief. But I've been learning the last couple of months, being home more,
Yeah.
how the house functions and me being there. And wow, I don't have to freak out about this. It doesn't have to be quite like this.
Yeah. What
It's
if
been good.
for those who are married or have families that are listening, what if you decided that this will become the best part of your whole lifelong time in marriage? And
What are you going to do?
yeah, and this is and this is literally the best marriage years of our lives. This year. So I saw a meme that is true of me. 2020 is the worst year I've ever seen. It's not the worst year I've ever experienced. Worst years I ever experienced, I would never want to go back to. But right now we've gone through corrections in our marriage, through corrections in my travel schedule, i.e. cancellations, corrections in our priorities, and the good fruit of that is beginning to happen. Even the hardest parts of it, we're seeing God fill those things, like grieving my mother-in-law. God is filling that up, and we've never had such good family connections, even around around grieving her. And so the challenges themselves become opportunities for an upgrade in faith and trust, surrender. That's working for us, and we're like, wow, I'm really sorry for those who are experiencing actual trauma. I get that. I don't want to dismiss that. I'm just saying, this is so far been a good year for us, and not only because it's got easier somehow. In some ways, the ways it got harder have been the worst thing that ever happened to you can become the best thing that ever happened to you. Any addict will tell you that. So.
Well, I know that mental health is a really big deal right now for a lot of people, and it's getting ramped up. I was at a fire department training event, and they had professional counselors and therapists there. And one of the comments came out, and I wrote it down as soon as I heard it, because I knew this is real. It's not about mental illness; it's about mental unawareness.
Oh,
and I thought that. Oh yeah. That totally changed my thinking, that these individuals are just not aware of something that may be more true. And so when we see people with having mental anxiety, there could very well be an unawareness of peace that's already in them, because we know Christ's peace is in all things, in all people, but they're not aware of it. Yeah. So, and even for believers, we're not always aware. That's why the honesty of your story, my story, and all those, each person watching has their own story, being honest with it, because when we're in this kind of a crisis, we need each other to talk through it and realize, I'm not in this alone. They're having trouble too. Oh, okay. I thought I was the only one. I'm trying to be more spiritual here. No. This is not about being more spiritual or trying to live up to a standard. This is about the now again.
Yeah.
Where's Christ in front of you right now? This is the only thing that is true right now.
That's really good. The kingdom of God is now. It's the only place it exists, actually.
Yep.
And the hinge point is letting go.
In my sermon series that I'm doing now, it'll be 2 weeks now, but I'm dealing with the topic of Nebuchadnezzar's dream of hope. Oh. And because we got all these yahoos, let me rephrase that. I shouldn't say that. I'm trying to reword my terminology. I just slipped. I'm sorry. There are individuals who Christ abides in.
You say Yahoo.
Well, I said idiots. I said idiots over in a group, and realized somebody called me on it right away, and rightly so, because that's my flippant response.
Yeah.
But there are individuals that are hijacking this pandemic as an end times fear mongering trip,
right?
And yet I see Nebuchadnezzar's dream and Daniel's interpretation of it as the kingdom has come and is growing and fills the whole earth. The gospel wins. Jesus wins. It's not a fearful time. And I think that is a picture of Christ coming at the time of the Roman Empire. So when the rock comes and smashes the toes.
Dude, that's awesome.
So that's what's coming in 2 weeks. But it's time for hope. Enough of this negative news. I think if we sense the news we're hearing is creating a tightness and a fear, it's not from Christ.
Right.
So I don't know. That's how we take thoughts captive, I guess.
That's one way. Yep. Really.
Yeah. So do we have a couple more minutes? We're not going to get into deconstruction stress. Maybe we can have another call if you're a game, but don't answer that live. We'll chat with that later. Okay. But you got a book coming out, and because we got like 5 minutes left, I don't want to take more of your time. Can you tell us about this cool book that I think you and Paul wrote, or what's?
Yeah. So, and it's really relevant to all of this because it's about a pastor who had been covering up some of his shameful past using projection, i.e. fundamentalism. Mm-hmm. And what happens is the book opens with him having a massive implosion. And so he's going to have to face his demons and work through a healing journey if he's able. In my youngest son, who is one of the voice actors in the audio version, he said, "Dad, this is a compliment. This is an effed up version of Dickens' Christmas Carol, complete with visitations and God bless us, everyone." So what the book is about is it tracks the journey of a man who is trying to live off of self-will and pride, the clenched fist of defiance and control. So all the things you would associate with a clenched fist, right? And then he has this massive crash that leaves him despondent and despairing. And in fact, it would be like going from a clenched fist to a limp wrist, just of he's beaten, but is he beaten enough? Like, what will it take to how bad does it have to get for him to bottom out? And so bottoming out isn't just as bad as it can get. Bottoming it out is when you flip your hands over into surrender.
And, I just shared the pre-release picture from your page.
Yeah, here's a review from a friend of mine who just read it. Impactful, transformative, riveting, graphic, disturbing, revealing, and really this story does reflect real lives who've experienced abuse and have been abusers.
Yep.
It reflects people who have had this implosion and went through the hell that it takes to bottom out and to encounter healing love and forgiveness of self even. So that's, and I'm just so grateful that Paul Young would partner with me in writing this because, he's such a generous, good guy, and he was willing to throw his energy into, making what might have been a good book into something beautiful.
Wow. I'm looking forward to seeing it. Apparently September 1st, it's available in Canada in hard copy.
Well, in fact, today I'm just working out if I can get you a link. There is a local bookstore in Canada called House of James. It's willing to do online sales before it hits the official release date. So I'll get you that link if you want to share that at some
Absolutely.
point. It's going to be out. It's hardcover, Kindle, and by the first week in September, this audiobook that is like a radio drama. We hired professional actors.
Wow.
To do the voices. So I think it's an important book for people in deconstruction, people in recovery, or people who care about others that want to walk them through to surrender to the care of a loving God. And but it comes with trigger warnings because we're dealing with real life kind of trauma that and so I know from your backstory, Mike, I think you're going to be moved by what you see there, because it in some ways you'll resonate with parts of the journey.
Okay, thanks for the warning.
Yeah, have a Kleenex box ready. But
okay, well, the Shack did that for me for sure. I was a blubbering mess. I went through one of those, those little tiny packs of Kleenex you keep in your pocket. It was gone by the end of the screening.
Yeah. And even, Paul, obviously, because Paul Young co-wrote the book, he's read it a bunch of times, but he listened to the audio version and he wept through the last hour of it.
Wow.
And he just said, this is important. This could heal people. So,
well, I'm all about helping us grow and continue to grow. As I said at the beginning, like the reason I call this program Still Growing in Grace is because none of us have arrived. I see a lot of ministry mindsets talk about arriving, and this is once you reach this step, there you are. But it's more fluid, it's taken so many years to unlearn that. So I look forward to another conversation sometime about deconstruction and reconstruction. And
I'd love to.
Yeah, very cool. All right, I'm going to end the live stream, but if you can stay on for a moment, that'd be great.
You betcha.
Thank you everyone for watching and commenting. Sorry, I normally have ADHD and I can read the comments real fast, but there's some good friends that are chiming in. Catherine Toons there, and Bill Thrasher, and Kevin Shea, and a few others. So, and Robert and Windsor. So, all right, that's it. I'm going to hit the off button over here. Thanks again. Share this link. I will re-upload this to YouTube after this broadcast is done, because YouTube takes another couple hours before it takes the live stream and makes it available. So I'll get that done as soon as I can. Thanks again for watching. Catch you next week. Next week, by the way, we're gonna hear from the Naked Pastor, David Hayward.
Good old David. Say hi.
I will. And so we're gonna have a chat with him next week. So all right, catch you all then.